Welcome back to the program. I'm now joined by Kenny Xu. He's a DC-based journalist focusing on identity politics. He's the author of an upcoming book called An Inconvenient Minority, the Ivy League Admissions Cases, and the Attack on Asian American Excellence. Now, Kenny, first of all, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me, Sam.
Okay.
And the book is actually out, An Inconvenient Minority, so it's out already, so you can get it.
Okay, perfect. It's
Yeah.
not an upcoming, it's an actual existing book.
Exactly.
And you should get a copy of it. And I'm going to go out on a little bit of a limb here because I am going to speculate that you consider yourself Asian American.
Well, I'm happy to inform you your speculation is correct.
It's always risky when we do that, right?
Yeah, I am an Asian American, indeed. I'm a Chinese American specifically.
Ni hao.
Yeah.
So, and by the way, do you speak Chinese?
Only a little bit, really. I was born in Maryland, so I did not get the full gamut of Chinese.
So, and it's funny because I'm a bit of a linguist, so I'm fluent in 5 languages and did not grow up speaking a second language, but I often regret not having spoken a foreign language to my children, but I felt so incompetent to teach them a foreign language because I didn't know how to teach them a foreign language. It's absurd, but true. And so
Really?
I often, I wish for you that your parents had sort of insisted that you learn Chinese while you were growing up, but that didn't happen, obviously.
I think it's one of my only regrets, my early childhood experience. Everybody should try to learn a second language. I learned Spanish actually, so I actually know pretty good Spanish. But I should have learned more Chinese for sure.
Mandarin, yeah. Well, there's always time,
Yeah.
Kenny. Maybe your next book will be about that. So talk to me about this book though, because there is a scandal. You've also written, you're a prolific writer, obviously, and you've written this piece up on the Federalist that's critical race theory's poisonous roots trace back to Harvard University. So talk to me about that, because do you see this all sort of as one piece?
I think it's not all of it, but I think critical race theory is very much an elite phenomenon that is trying to be impressed and pushed upon ordinary Americans. So in my book, An Inconvenient Minority, I talk about Asian Americans and how they inconvenience the critical race theory narrative on race. Because critical race theory asserts that the structures of our laws and our societies and our systems are stacked against minorities and are for white people. But if those structures are stacked against minorities, how come Asian Americans have been able to do better on these structures than even white people? Asian Americans do better on the SAT. They have higher incomes, higher socioeconomic status, and now they've unfortunately become so successful that colleges like Harvard University have to discriminate against them or feel the need to discriminate against them to admit other minorities. So this is a crazy phenomenon. It emerged from elite colleges like Harvard, critical race theory. And we can talk about that, but that is what my book, An Inconvenient Minority, really gets into.
Right. So let's back it up for just a minute and enlighten people as to what we're referring to when we talk about the discrimination that has happened at Harvard. If you check the box that you're Asian or Asian descent or what have you, then you are less likely to get in. It's a weird thing. It's like they're no longer working on a meritocracy. They're working off of the critical race theory that basically says, well, for every Asian we have to allow 2 blacks or something.
Yeah. It's a racial equity, and it's treating people on the basis of race. The funny thing so this is what happened. Harvard University created a race-based admissions process that has been deemed as constitutional by the Supreme Court. So the Supreme Court currently allows Harvard University to discriminate on the basis of race, which is a precedent that is basically nowhere else in society right now. Why? Because Harvard wants a diverse student body. So in order to create a diverse student body, they preferentially treat Black Americans in the admissions process, and in the process discriminate against higher qualified Asian Americans to let lower qualified people of other races into the school system. As a result, an Asian American has to score 450 points higher on the SAT to have the same chance of
How
admission as a Black
much?
person. 450 points.
Higher than
A
what?
Black person. A Black person.
Because they score high already. I don't think there are 450 points left over for them to up their score, right?
Well, it's crazy. I mean, what the study's really saying is that if the SAT is out of 1,600 now, it used to be out of 2,400. But if you were a Black person who scored, say, a 1,200 on the SAT, you would have a higher chance of admissions to Harvard than if you were an Asian person who scored a 1,500.
Okay. What is to prevent an Asian person from identifying as a Black person, checking that box, getting admitted, showing up, and then getting ousted because no, you're not allowed to self-identify as a Black person? That would be a tremendous lawsuit.
So now you're getting into the weeds. The
I
thing is,
love
you
the
can't do
weeds.
that. So you can't do that. And I'll tell you why. And people have tried, people have attempted. The reason being is because Harvard has a massive data mining operation. So even if you don't check your race, Harvard's going to know your race. And they're also going to know your parents' income. They're also going to know your school, your neighborhood. They're going to know the crime rate in your neighborhood. They're going to know your future prospective careers. They have a massive data mining operation that gathers data on you without your consent, and then they judge you on it.
Are you saying they're profiling?
Yes.
That sounds like another lawsuit.
That's what they're
Southern
doing.
Poverty Law Center really should take that up.
Oh yeah, and you know what? This is widespread. I mean, the College Board now, they operate a massive database of information. All it does is gather information on students' backgrounds and histories, and then they sell that information to all of these colleges and universities who can use that information to judge you, of course, on your financial prospects as well, so they can see so they can use that information without your consent, of course, to determine, how much money they want to give you, so they don't spend too much money on you.
I think it's Myron Magnet who argues this. I'm sure other people argue this also. This idea that you are advancing a minority, Black people, or whatever minority, basically in a sense above their ability, into an environment that is highly competitive, and in that sense you're putting them at a great disservice. And so not only you're putting them at a great disservice, but Harvard, if they track their graduates, then their graduate success rate has to decline, does it not?
It definitely does decline, unfortunately. Now, Harvard is able to mask it for a couple of reasons. One is grade inflation. The average grade at Harvard is an A minus. And so what happens, unfortunately, is that you have less qualified Black Americans who get into Harvard, who take majors that, if they're well qualified for, are great majors, like STEM majors, or maybe they want to go to law school. But what happens, and this is based on the data, you have, unfortunately, Black Americans who are admitted because of affirmative action to law schools, get 25%, tend to graduate in the lower 25th percentile of the law school admissions class. And that does not help them, because equally important to the prestige of the law school that you go to is your class rank. And you're not helping these students. You may make a nice cool, diverse student body, but you're not helping these students.
So then Harvard will suffer long term. And in fact, I've read that the studies show that if you are qualified or even accepted to Harvard, but for some reason choose to go to another school, whether it's because of the finances or because of the location or what have you. And this goes for the elite Ivy League schools, right? So Harvard,
Yeah.
Yale, Princeton, Cornell. If you're accepted and choose a different path, 5 years after graduation, you're earning the same money as the people who graduated from those Ivy League schools.
Yeah, and I know that study. So it's basically a study of merit versus prestige. People love to get into prestigious universities because it thinks that gives them extra opportunities. Now, in one sense, it does. But in another sense, this country is still, it does because it gives you access to elite consulting and banking firms, if that's what you're into. But in another sense, if you are meritorious enough for an Ivy League university but end up not going, you're gonna do fine. You're gonna do fine. But here's the issue though. Here's the issue, Sam. Um, you Harvard has a $40 billion endowment. It is the most well-resourced university in America, in the world. And in fact, its endowment alone could pay for a sixth of the endowments of every college in America. 1/6 of the total endowments of America goes to the Ivy Leagues. It's crazy. And when you give that much resources to a college and a university, you kind of expect it to be the best of the best. You kind of are relying and putting responsibility on that university to produce the best scientists, engineers, lawyers, doctors, etc. And they're not. Their education is declining. Their grade inflation is increasing, and they're getting all of this money as a remnant of their prestige. But eventually, the tower has to fall.
Yeah. Um, it's really it's striking to me when I saw that study, and you say, and rightly so, opportunities, you get more opportunity with the Harvard imprimatur. You just do, right?
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that you are able to take advantage of those opportunities. And the people who have fewer opportunities, who have the merit of Harvard or Yale, could have studied at Harvard or Yale, they've their learning hasn't suffered, and they perhaps are better equipped to take advantage of the fewer opportunities that they have. And so the playing field is level after about 5 years outside of college. It's very similar to the study that they did years and years ago with preschool, where they taught kids how to
Yeah.
read. But by the end of kindergarten, all the kids were literally had just resorted to the very same level. So the kids
Well,
who had advanced prematurely, say, we're back down to ground level with
yeah.
the kids who weren't advanced at all, who had come up to ground level. And I talk about this because I'm very much about home education. Parents are like,
Yeah.
well, my child's not reading, at a fourth grade level, and or whatever it is. And my
Mhm.
point is that, we learn things at a time in life when our brain is able to process them, and certainly not before. Now, you can learn
Yeah.
something after that, but if your brain isn't ready to process it, and I'm talking about early childhood development, right? If your
Yeah.
brain's not ready to process it, it simply won't. So I know people who unschool. That's not something that I subscribe to, but they unschool, and their approach is, well, if they need the math, they'll learn the math at the time that they need it. If they need math to get into college, they'll learn it then. The
Yeah.
problem I think we face is that
Go ahead.
our education, the way we think about education, is just wrong.
Mhm.
Just there's so little basis for it, but we've all gotten on this treadmill. We went into the factory, and the factory says you stuff the widgets into the brains, and then out pops a fully fledged human being, and that doesn't seem to be the case anymore, or maybe ever was.
Yeah, and this is the case with gifted and talented programs too, because every parent wants to believe their kid is gifted. But if you put a kid in a gifted talented program they're not prepared for, they're not going to do well in that gifted talent. I mean, the empirical studies show that when you're at the back of a gifted talented program, you can get very discouraged. But at the
Right.
same time, there are kids who are doing math at a fifth grade level who are in third grade, and you teach math to them at a third grade level when they actually capable of doing math at a fifth grade level, and you're just wasting their potential. You're actually discouraging them in the opposite direction because you're not challenging them. So everybody does need to be taught in a way that does challenge them. But I agree, we shouldn't focus so much on grade by grade. Everybody needs to make the grade in everything at every time.
Okay, we're going to take a quick break. I love the way that you're thinking, and I do want to talk to you about critical race theory. So we're just going to
Sure.
take a quick break here, and I will be right back if you're listening on radio or podcast. And if you want to catch the rest of this interview, you can tune into sorbos.locals.com and find it there with Kenny Xu. The name of the book, which is out now, is An Inconvenient Minority, the Ivy League Admissions Cases and the Attack on Asian American Excellence. And while the title talks about the specific case of the Asian Americans being discriminated against, I think this book is a very important commentary on the discrimination that we've said we've done away with. And yet here is a prestigious, probably maybe the most prestigious American university practicing in discrimination. So I urge you to get the book, An Inconvenient Minority, the Ivy League Admissions Cases and the Attack on Asian American Excellence. And thank you so much for listening. This is the Sam Sorbo Show. Hi, folks. Sam Sorbo here. Are you tired of seeing all of America's resources being drained away? I know that I'm kind of fed up, and I think the time for talking is over, and it's time that we took action to try to save this country. And there is one little thing that you can do. We saw our friends and families, jobs and businesses sort of wither on the vine, while America's huge corporations had a financial windfall this past year. Uh, that doesn't sound fair to me. That doesn't seem right. I think it's time that we put our money where our conservative values are. Are you happy that you're funding corporations that donate to Planned Parenthood? I'm not. I have found an outlet, and I want to share that with you. So email me at buyusmade@protonmail.com. Buy, B-U-Y, usmade@protonmail.com. Just email, and I'll give you some more information. But it's time that we started to make our dollars speak for us. Thanks for listening. This is the Sam Sorbo Show.